Welcome to Athletes to Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct. We've created a platform to help alumni to network and connect through their various affinity groups, whether it's college communities, whether it's fraternities, sororities, business alumni, or athletes. But one thing that we've recognized is as we look to help others is we see there's definitely a major challenge for athletes transitioning out of sports. And we've developed this show to teach and inspire athletes that there's life after sports. And I'm so excited today because anytime I can bring on a fellow Blue Hen, it's fantastic. So today we have on with us Scott Brunner. How you doing, Scott?
Hey, Rob, how are you?
I'm doing great. So Scott played college football at the University of Delaware, and we kind of talked about it offline. Delaware's somewhat known to be quarterback U. There's been quite a few quarterbacks that have played in the NFL. He then transitioned and he was played in the NFL, started out with the Giants, and then ultimately went on Wall Street and worked in the capital markets and institutional research. And we're excited to hear more about that whole journey, starting from playing sports as a youngster and all the way through to what you do today.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. I've had a great experience in sports, and here I am today, 40 some years after graduating from the University of Delaware.
All right. So we always talk when I'm talking to Blue Hens, we talk about different things too. We can talk about Main Street and Stone Bloom, but we won't bore you all with that. We also we've been fortunate. I'm working in the different sports. So we've had a swimmer from Delaware. We've had a famous baseball player from Delaware. Now we have a famous quarterback from Delaware. So when you were growing up, Scott, talk about playing sports, youth sports, and how it kind of shaped you leading up to, let's say, high school.
Well, I kind of had a unique experience growing up because my dad was a college football coach, was a high school coach initially, but then he was a college football coach at Villanova, Temple, Princeton, before he went into the NFL and coach. So I had access to a lot of things growing up that a lot of other kids didn't have. And I was at college football practices from the time I was about 10 years old. So
Wow.
I was truly indoctrinated into athletics at a young age.
That's great. Now, I guess I would assume that you dreamed of being a professional athlete. So was it a football player then, or did you want to go into some other sport when you were young?
Yeah, I think when I was a kid, baseball was the sport for
Yeah.
most young kids. It's easy to handle. It's something you do in the summertime, and I love to play baseball. And football was fun, but baseball was something we really did a lot of. And eventually, I figured out I was probably going to be a little bit more. Uh, I'm physically more adept at football than I was at baseball, so I shifted over and concentrated more on baseball once I got into concentrated more on football when I got into high school.
Yeah, it's fine because I like to ask that question, then I always joke around and everybody hears the same answer from me. But I dreamed like you of being a Major League Baseball player. Unfortunately, the skill set wasn't there, so I ended up doing what I'm doing today. So talk about one thing. This was an interesting one that came up with on my show. We were talking about back when you and I went to high school, there wasn't really social media. What do you see now today? Like because with social media you hear some of these stories about, I guess, for a lot of times of getting themselves in trouble, like saying things that come back years later. Give me some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean it's tough for young athletes to navigate those waters today because they can be turbulent. But there's also the pressure of trying to be able to fit into your class, and there's no guarantees that you're going to be a world famous athlete someday. You're just trying to living your life as you see fit from day to day. But when I talk to young athletes, I try to make them aware that your actions today can be judged, sometime in the future. So think
Yeah.
long and hard. You start posting some things on social media that seem like for fun today, but could have negative repercussions in the future.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I just that's one thing I always told my kids: never put in writing what you don't want, what somebody could see that you don't want somebody to see, because anybody could somehow get across. So when we'll fast forward to college. So obviously playing sports, playing football, any other sport, very demanding with your practice time, and you're kind of limiting all that. But um, any thoughts when you were at school? Did you think at all about what's going to happen next in my future, or was it just so kind of zoned in on your football?
Oh no, I was definitely. I had no plans of playing football after college.
Okay.
My story is that I went to Delaware. There was another quarterback there who we were both in the same class named Jeff Comlo, who eventually became the starter ahead of me, and I redshirted, so I was therefore 1 year behind him effectively um, in my college journey. And he started for 3 years, and I sat there on the bench and watched him play for 3 years. And he graduated and went on and got drafted by the Detroit Lions. And so I had 1 year to kind of prove myself and show myself. And I had no idea that any pro teams would be looking at me, especially a kid playing at Delaware, even though the prior quarterback had just been drafted. I had no illusions of going to the NFL. I was just hoping to get into the NCAA playoffs and compete for a national championship my senior year. And luckily enough, I was drafted after that. I had a good year. We had a good team, and I got drafted and made the best of it with the Giants and the Broncos and the Cardinals in the NFL.
Now, what back to didn't you end up winning that national championship?
We did. Yeah.
There you go. I bet that felt good. There's Delaware's won quite a few championships, but I'm sure that was definitely when you're there. I'm sure it was very special. So like because you weren't definitely gonna seeing yourself as being an NFL. Like were there like within the athletic department, I guess, were there any things that they did as far as helping to prepare athletes for what their future might be once they're done with sports?
Not back then. I mean, we were students,
Right.
and the demands on our time were not quite as severe as they are on kids today. Once the off season came around, we were pretty much on our own. We had no off season training programs. We were, it was recommended that you lift weights, but there was no program where you had to go check in and prove that you were working out. Your motivation was when you showed up for fall camp, if you were going to play or not. You better work at it during the off season. So, we transitioned pretty quickly once the season ended back into on campus students, and going to fraternity parties, going to class, and playing hoops at the Carpenter Center, and working out together as a small group.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then, I mean, do you know anything about what they're doing today there? Or
Oh yeah, it's very structured. They have early morning workouts for the most part every day, and the regular season practice schedule is all early morning based. So by 11 o'clock in the morning, they're pretty much done with their practice obligations, and then they go off to classes and do whatever classes they have, and then they have meetings later in the day to review whatever happened in practice. And in the off season, it's very similar. They have off-season programs. You don't deal with the coaches, but you deal with the strength and conditioning coach, and you're down doing your running and your lifting 3 or 4 days a week at the minimum.
Right. Yeah, like one of the things that we've talked a little bit about, and I mean, every school is different, but kind of going back, like to going to school and kind of rolling up the sleeves with the athletic department and trying to come up with curriculum that not only helps the current athletes, but alumni athletes as well. So kind of looking at, bigger picture stuff, whether it's financial literacy or mental health, or, looking at ways to teach them, what to look for in the career, but not just like a 1 day kind of thing, but more of like a bit. Is that something that you see could be beneficial to, to college athletic programs?
Yeah, I think many colleges are moving in that direction right now. I know at Delaware they built a whole new facility which is attached to the stadium, which has all of their nutritional benefits. And that's where they do all their meals. They do their workouts there. They have their tutors are all there. And it's not just for the football program; it's for the entire athletic program. So it's kind of one base operation where a student athlete can go down and get the help that they need to deal with the stresses of being a student athlete at a major college athletic environment.
Yeah, that's great. And in Delaware, I mean, piping the horn because we went there, but I mean, Delaware is pretty progressive in, I think looking at different things and trying to be state of the art, which is great. And hopefully there's more of that. I mean, it seems like you talk to a lot of athletes, and they'll just say, obviously, when they're playing, they're so focused on the sport that they're not really thinking about it. So even if you wanted to go to certain athletes and say, hey, maybe these are some things to look at, big picture, they might not really zone in on it because they're more focused on their sport.
Right. But I think that's part of what makes an athlete attractive to to the working people that are hiring
Right.
students coming out of school. They can see that they have the ability to really get focused in, laser focused on what they're doing, and excelling at something. So those are the qualities that a lot of employers are looking for, that are exhibited in real time by athletes in those type of environments.
Yeah, no, I agree that that's something that's really important. I mean, we kind of talked a little bit about that with one of the guys that I previously talked to, just the importance of it and how athletes should use that skill set. So, one thing that obviously we're real involved with Alumni Direct is that alumni connection. So, I want to hit on it from a couple different angles with you. So, back when you were at school, was there and I don't mean from a financial side because that gets into the whole NIL, we'll talk about that too, but was there involvement with alumni coming back, and maybe not even just football, like all sports, where they would work and talk with the current athletes?
Yeah, I think it was one-off kind of situations. It wasn't really a program of any type that happened. If you ran into somebody, or if you were introduced to a prior athlete or an alumnus, and you hit it off with them. I know when I was playing, uh, a former Delaware quarterback, guy named Tom DeMuzio, who was one of their all-time greats, about 10 years before me. He happened to live in central New Jersey, where I was living near Princeton. And in the summers, he volunteered basically to get together with me and work out and chat through different things. He was an executive at Johnson and Johnson, and he obviously had some great athletic skills. So he shared a lot of his thoughts and wisdom with me when I was a student athlete at Delaware.
And that's great, and I think it'd be great to see more of that. And so it's kind of I talked to one. This was a little strange to me, but I was talking to one person who's an agent, and she said that like her athlete who played in the NFL, successful career there, wanted to go back to his school, and it's like the school wasn't, not that they frowned upon it, but they weren't so anxious. And I think that's something that they're missing out on, because is it like today with Delaware? Do you see a little more involvement trying to get the alumni athletes back?
I think schools want to reach out to their alumni, but in this day and age, coaches are changing so frequently, and they're
Good
trying to
point.
reestablish their own culture, and they don't necessarily have that direct tie with a lot of the previous generation of athletes. And their concern is doing what's best for their guys today. And
Yeah.
coaches have enough foresight to say, yeah, I can reach out to some of those former athletes and they can be a benefit. And other coaches are just so laser focused on doing, managing their limited amount of time with their athletes that they
Right.
miss on that asset that they might have available to them.
Yeah, and I think it might be too that I guess because the coaches would be great because they're going to have that relationship, and maybe it's something more of the onus on the athletic department or even just the school in general to try to tap into that alumni, because there's so much power with that alumni connection. I think people want to help fellow alumni out. So once you like still kind of sticking on the alumni topic, um, how was your, like, how do you see it now from a NFL perspective? I've had the fortune of talking to other both NFL players, Major League Baseball players, NBA, to kind of see what their experience with their, whether it's the alumni association or is it more player association driven.
Um, it's definitely not the pro player association driven. It's more, for me, it's more alumni association. I had a small business kind of set up on the side of my financial consulting businesses that I was mentoring quarterbacks specifically over the last 15 years, probably. So I would, take a couple of quarterbacks who graduated. It wouldn't necessarily be a Delaware quarterback. It could be a quarterback from anywhere. And they would come and basically live with me. And I partnered up with one of these NFL combine training groups. And so they would train them to get ready for the combine, and I would help train them for their transition from college to pro quarterback, because there's definite differences between playing at the college level and the pro level. And so I've had that experience to work with young athletes coming out, and as a result of that, I then expanded it to high school. So over the years, I've had the ability, the last 15 years, I've probably worked with 50 to 70 different, college and high school athletes in mentoring them specifically for playing football, but also, the conversation works its way around to, what am I doing now? Because I'm not making a living mentoring quarterbacks. Years ago. And today I do it more as a hobby than I do as a
That's awesome. And I mean, that's the true spirit of giving back. And I think that's what we're trying to encourage, with whether it's the college or at the professional level. Because like I said, I mean, one guy was a former Major League Baseball player, and he talked, he said mostly the interaction from an alumni perspective is like the star athletes. And he said it's worse with the minor league baseball players. And I guess in a sense, minor league baseball players might almost be like college football players, right? Because it's almost like college football is kind of the springboard of the NFL, and minor league baseball to major league. So we're trying to find ways that we can better help. So one of the hot topics right now, and I mentioned it briefly, is NIL, name, image, likeness. Give me your thoughts on. I get back when we were in school that wasn't happening, but give me your thoughts on that.
Well, I think the NCAA blew it, years ago when they tried to be so strict and hard-headed about a lot of their rules and regulations and eligibility for athletes. And now the cat's out of the bag with NIL, and they still haven't figured out how they're going to actually manage that process. And ultimately, I think what's going to happen is that schools are going to end up having to pay.
So it'd be like a salary for the athletes coming in.
They're going to pay a salary.
Yeah.
Thinking it's probably in the school's best interest to do that, because they really have no control over the NIL. At least if you're paying salaries to the athletes, you can control it. And when I say that, for football, I'll speak specifically to football. There's about 800 colleges across the country that play college football. You're only talking about 70 to maybe 100 that are going to be in that category of actually paying, the kids are running their programs like a professional business. And the other ones are going to exist just as we've known college sports have existed for the last 100 years. And the only benefit will be that kids will have that ability to kind of monetize their name, image, likeness, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And they won't run the risk of getting disqualified from participating at the college level. And probably more of the issue right now is the transfer portal, which really got a lot of coaches and schools, in a tizzy. And if the schools were paying directly, they could set up contracts with athletes, which would eliminate that transfer portal for the most part, because you'd be contractually obligated to that school for however many years you wanted to negotiate that, whether it be 1 year or whether it be 4 years.
Right.
So that's probably a simple solution. It's not going to happen tomorrow, and the president's really going to do that. I don't know, but I think that's where it's heading. In the next 5 to 10 years, and then you're not going to see any more Big Tens, and the conferences will be gone. It'll just be those 50 to 70 schools are going to have their own super conference, and that'll be a championship game.
Yeah, that's interesting, because obviously that's a big topic every year. Like different conferences, they have the chance to play in the national championship, and I think like people always talk to, when I've asked the question, one concern obviously is from financial literacy of all of a sudden getting these these big dollars and not knowing that, hey, you got to pay taxes. I always say it's not just, athletes, it's anybody young could have the same mentality if they get the other thing that's come up too recently in conversation is people being concerned that it's taking away from the team itself, because if these players are more focused on NIL. I mean, do you see that at all, or?
I haven't seen it. I don't think, I think NIL is so in such its infancy right now that it's not something that you could actually go out there and point to with any certainty of how
Right.
it impacts. But it's at every level, people get compensated, differently.
Right.
Whether they get preferential treatment somehow is that was the compensation in the past, or whether it's with dollars and cents, which will be the preferential treatment at that level in the future. And at the NFL, you see guys getting paid all different levels, and they
Yeah,
all come together and they perform,
that's
because
true.
if the team performs well, then they're going to be more likely to to raise their value and their status going forward.
Right. So, like I talked about, to the listeners and viewers, the big thing we're trying to address with athletes transitioning out of sports and just some of the different challenges, whether it's the mental health challenges or financial. So, talk a little bit about, you went through two transitions in a sense out of sports. Well, not out of sports, but one from college into professional. So, that's part one of kind of hearing that journey, and then part two, once you were done playing the NFL.
Yeah, first of all, when I was playing, we weren't getting paid enough that the day you retired from your sport, you were financially secure the rest of your life. Today that's a different equation for a lot of guys. But there's a lot of guys who that still holds true for them. That that playing a professional sport is just your first job. It's not your last, and that's kind of the attitude that a lot of guys have to take. And the other is for the guy who does have that luxury of knowing that financially he'll be secure. If you retire when you're 30 or 35, you still have a pretty long life to live. So you've got to do something else.
Sure.
So the question is not what your job is going to be, but what are you going to do with the rest of your life is more appropriate question to ask each of the athletes. And then that encompasses the guy who's going to have to financially support his family, and uh, it also addresses the issue of how you, even though you're financially secure, how are you going to support your well-being mentally and emotionally going forward in the rest of your life.
What was it hard in, just going from playing college to being a professional athlete?
Yeah, I think the hard thing from going from athlete to business, the hardest thing I found is that when you're an athlete, basically people are telling you what to do, when to do it. All that stuff is taken care of for you, and your job is just to perform, your specific task. And once you get out into the real world or the working, that's not.
It's okay for Scott to say it. See, like if I said that, it's like, okay, I don't want to be offensive. I'm saying the real world versus that. So he said it. I didn't.
Yeah. All of a sudden now you're kind of on your own, and you have to do a lot of that stuff on your own, and either have to understand when and how to reach out for help for things that you're not qualified to handle yourself, or which requires the ability to kind of compartmentalize and deal with all those things, and understand their importance and prioritize those things, so that you can move on in your life with your family and with your own career. And uh, and then the other thing is identifying what you want to do, which is something that you can do as an athlete, before you even transition. Start figuring out what other interests I have and where I might want to go, and knowing that you probably financially will have a little bit of a window, if not a huge window,
Right.
to figure it out. You don't have to jump at the first thing you see, but you can kind of wade into different things that you're interested in, and then try to figure out where you're going to fit and how that's going to benefit you going forward.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think of it that way because like college, you don't necessarily have that cushion because now you're going into the real world. But as a professional athlete, if you know if you're fortunate enough to have some type of financial cushion, you can find the right things. A lot of times it seems talking to people like they identify themselves as like, hey, I'm Scott the football player, I'm Rob the runner, I'm Bill the baseball player, and not looking at that bigger picture. So
Well, the other hard thing for an athlete to as an athlete to wrap your arms around is the fact that, okay, now I'm 30 years old, let's say, you graduate from college, you have a 6 to 8 year career. Now you're 30 and you're entering the workforce. The people you're competing with that are in your age group have already been doing this. They're veterans at what you're looking to do. They're already 6 or 8 years ahead of you in their career trajectory. And how do I reconcile myself from being the top of the heap, all of a sudden have to start in the mailroom, so to speak, and work my way and try to catch up, and make up that 8 year difference that my contemporaries have an advantage over me as a result of that. So it's understanding where your strengths are that you bring from your athletic career, and also understanding where you fit in the pecking order. What's your, as Bill Belichick likes to say, what's your job? What's your role? Do your job. And your job is not to be the CEO of the company the day you retire from pro sports. Your job is to do something else, and maybe you work your way into that CEO role.
Right, absolutely. Well, talk a little bit about kind of the power of, we talk about power of networking, connecting. Talk about that from an athletic perspective. Is that something that you did or that you see other athletes doing, whether it's at, when you're in college or at the professional level?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like being a fraternity type of situation where athletes from other sports can relate to each other a little more easily. And then depending on what level you're playing at, you obviously have a certain fan base and a certain name recognition or cachet, which allows you to jumpstart your networking library a little quicker than somebody else might be able to do.
And I think and that becomes a challenge sometimes. Like I was talking to one agent and he just said, the best time to network and connect is when you're still playing. And I think you hit it there. So yeah, obviously, you've done a great job with that. And that's probably good advice to other athletes is just, like what Scott's saying here is just, be open to, utilizing that network. And especially, if you do have, like you said, some cachet as a professional athlete, utilize that to meet people, especially when you are still playing and once you're out, because I think people want to help. And so if you build that network, it's going to come back and ultimately will help you in the future.
Yeah, and I think also it's something that I've never thought about, but is becoming more prevalent is, you have to become your own brand for the most part. And I think younger people understand that a little bit more than we did.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Because of social media and the influence that social media can have in the world. And they understand that more clearly than I obviously do. But, for instance, I got a bunch of text messages last weekend because why? Because the Eagles are playing the 49ers. Well, what do I have to do? How does that relate to Scott Brunner? Every text, you were the youngest quarterback to ever beat the Eagles in the playoffs. Like, I had no idea. But for some reason that trivial question came out because Brock Purdy was obviously, a young quarterback, rookie quarterback. And, I beat the Eagles in a playoff game 40 years ago, and that's still circulating around. So the power of, the brand and the NFL, and the name recognition is real and valid. And it's amazing. It amazes me after 40 years.
Yeah. Well, it's not. I don't know if you were with the Giants at the time. The whole Herman Edwards, was that your time frame, or is that before or after?
That was That was right before me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That was Joe Pisarcik, right? So, yeah, as Giants fans, so I take I'm happy to hear that you beat the Eagles. It's funny, we joke around, and my whole family's from Philadelphia, and they're all big Eagles fans, and I went the other way, and being a Giants fan, and there's a lot of arrogant Eagle fans, but I'm sure there's a lot of arrogant Giant fans as well. But it's a good rivalry.
Sure.
So talk a little about so you had we've gone through pretty much. So take us to where you're at today, like after professional sports, a little bit about that journey in the financial world, and then what you're doing today.
Yeah, I retired about a year ago from the financial consulting world. I still have my hand in special projects, that I work on, and my wife and I just moved from North Jersey down to Delaware, back to the Wilmington area. So I've been kind of setting up house and relocating and building my network of people I know down there, and reassociating with people I haven't really seen in many years, and trying to figure out how I'm going to fit in, within the university and within the community at large. So I will probably try to continue my mentoring programs that I've worked on in North Jersey with some of the kids in the Delaware area. I've met with a couple of high school coaches and the Delaware coaches, obviously. So that's my first step. I've worked, dabbled in some artificial intelligence projects that are sports related, and coming up with the concept, and working through the funding for that. So that's a side project that hopefully I can bring to fruition in a year or two. But those are the kind of things I've been working on.
That's great. And so how do people find you? Like if
I
if I've got a high school senior, junior, star quarterback, or it's just, I want some Delaware advice. How can they find Scott Brunner?
I keep getting letters to my house from people I don't know. So that's how people keep finding me. But yeah, I mean, I don't have a website or anything anymore. I'm pretty much taking that down. But I can be found via email, which is scott.brunner12@gmail. Uh, is probably the easiest way to find me. Or if you contact the University of Delaware, they know how to reach out and get a hold of me as well. The athletic
Uh,
department, University of Delaware.
Okay, great. That's awesome. So you can find Alumni Direct. We're on alumnidirect.com, and you be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all those. And then our show, Athletes and Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey, highly encourage people to listen to it or watch it. We've got a lot of great stories, and we really want to make an impact. You can find us on all the different podcast networks as well as our YouTube channel. But Scott, this has been fantastic. And like I said, I love talking to fellow Blue Hens.
This is great. I enjoyed it. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, you're welcome.